this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan, tonight 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Why have I asked my HVAC guy I found on Angie.com to change my grandpa's trachea tube? Because I was so amazed by how quickly he replaced our air ducts. I knew I could trust him to change Pop-Pop's tube while I was on vacation.
Make it quick, young man.
Aw, see? Pop-Pop trusts you.
I think we should call a doctor.
Connecting homeowners with skilled pros for over 30 years. Angie, the one you trust to find the ones you trust. Find pros for all your home projects at Angie.com.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Welcome to One Thing Trump Did, available exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and if you're a regular listener, you know that every week on this show, we pick one thing coming out of the Trump White House to focus on and break down in a nonpartisan way with someone who knows what they are talking about. And our one thing this week is the deployment of the National Guard in Washington, D.C. to deal with crime. That deployment began on August 11th and was done because of an executive order by President Trump declaring a crime emergency. Under the law, the president can maintain control over policing in the Capitol for up to 30 days. And this wasn't, of course, the first time this has happened. Earlier this year, the National Guard was sent to Los Angeles after protests erupted there. Now the president is threatening to send National Guard troops to other cities, including Baltimore and Chicago. Here's Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker with a strong public rebuke to the threat of a deployment in Chicago.
There is no emergency in Chicago that calls for armed military intervention, and ask if they want their neighborhoods turned into a war zone by a wannabe dictator. No one from the White House or the executive branch has reached out to me or to the mayor. No one has reached out to our staffs. No effort has been made to coordinate or to ask for our assistance in identifying any actions that might be helpful to us. Local law enforcement has not been contacted. We have made no requests for federal intervention. None. Donald Trump wants to use the military to occupy a U.S. city, punish his dissidents, and score political points. Earlier today in the Oval Office, Donald Trump looked at the assembled cameras and asked for me personally to say, "Mr. President, can you do us the honor of protecting our city?" Instead, I say, "Mr. President, do not come to Chicago."
Joining me now is Mitchell Miller, who's Capitol Hill correspondent for Washington, D.C.'s news channel, WTOP News. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Well, and it's hard to tell exactly what things are like there unless you're there. You're there. What is it like in D.C. now? What do you see when it comes to the National Guard?
Well, it's really interesting because the portrayal of D.C., and I've lived here for over 25 years, is that we are under siege, that there are 2,000 National Guard members fanned out across the city. Federal agents are making arrests all over the city. But unless you are in some of those particular areas, you don't really notice a lot of difference. It's very, it's kind of at a dichotomy. If you go down the National Mall, you're going to see a lot of National Guard members there, and many of them are just posted along the mall. Some of them most recently have been collecting trash. They've been putting out mulch. They do not make arrests. Obviously, they have a major presence. If you go by Union Station, for example, there have been large armored vehicles there. There have been personnel there. They are not, by and large, in any of the neighborhoods where there is a lot of crime, particularly east of the Anacostia River in what are wards 7 and 8, which is where the most violence occurs. Now, there have been federal agents fanned out in some of those areas, as well as areas around DuPont Circle, which is in the central part of the city. They make a lot of traffic stops. They make a lot of low-level arrests. And then, of course, there have been a lot of arrests related to immigration. Close to about 400 people have been arrested on various charges for not being documented in the United States. So it's, like I said, it's kind of a surreal situation. I just looked out recently over the National Mall from my perch here in the U.S. Capitol, and you would not notice anything different right now as you're looking down the mall. So it's a very strange situation, to be honest.
Well, and I have to say, I've lived in D.C. many times throughout my life, and I used to always go take a walk around the National Mall at night by myself, often with headphones on. It's not a high crime area when it comes to Washington, D.C.
No, not at all. I mean, you look at where the National Guard has been deployed, for example, down by the Lincoln Memorial, you never hear about crime around the Lincoln Memorial. Right. So that's kind of the fascinating thing. For people that live here, they don't really, many of them don't really fully understand why the National Guard is deployed here.
So what does that tell you? That it's like for the cameras that they aren't allowed to do kind of the crime reduction stuff that the president would like them to do. So they're doing the stuff that they can do, which is to protect the buildings on the National Mall and maybe do immigration related stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's largely a photo op along the mall. Of course, that's an area where, as you well know, tourists are making heavy traffic down there, so they see this and kind of wonder what's going on. But unless you go to some of these central streets in the district at night where the federal agents and ICE, which has been talked about, the fact that many of them don't have masks, they make these traffic stops, people are really kind of surprised when all of these people are in those areas. But at the same time, the National Guard, as you know, they can't make arrests, so they can, make a presence here, but they are really here kind of for show.
How do the residents of Washington, D.C. feel about this?
It's interesting. There's a mixed view. I think that many of the people in, for example, those high crime areas, they welcome the fact that there is more of a federal presence as well as more police presence. These people have been calling for years to get more patrol officers in those parts of the city. Other parts of the city where there's not as much crime, and those people that are critical of President Trump just think, as you suggested, that a lot of it is just for show, that they don't really see the real need of what the National Guard is doing. So if you look at the polling within D.C., most people are generally opposed to this. However, if you look across the country, most people say crime is a huge issue. I think there was an Associated Press poll that said about 80% of the American public think crime is a big issue. However, it is interesting that over 55%, I believe, said they did not think that federal troops should actually be involved in the fight against crime.
Yeah, I have to say, the last time I lived in Washington, which was granted back in 2008, I knew so many people that had been violently mugged in Northwest DC that every time I would walk home from NPR, where I was working at the time, up to Adams Morgan, where I was living at the time, I would take the same route so that I could be in, lit streets with people around because I was worried about that. That being said, when you look at the statistics right now, crime is down year over year by a lot across the country, but in Washington, D.C. as well. As you think about the 25 plus years you've been in D.C., does it feel like crime is particularly better, worse, or about the same as it's been all along?
I would say overall it's better. To give you just a quick thumbnail of my personal history, I came here back in the mid to late 80s to go to grad school, and I lived in a very bad part of D.C. In Northeast along the H Street corridor, which was the scene of the 1968 riots. It had a lot of bad years. I actually chased down a guy who robbed a convenience store along there because I was so tired of all the crime that had happened in my neighborhood. I had my neighbors. The first week that I lived here, I moved here from Michigan, and my neighbors robbed me. So I'm very familiar with the amount of crime in D.C. I've had in the home that I live in now. I had somebody break into the house while I was in the house, and I chased the guy, and he eventually dropped my laptop and some other things while I was running him down. So I don't want to mitigate the fact that there has been serious crime over the years, but it was most heavy, I think, in those crack war years in the late 80s, early 90s. Just as a comparison, we were having close to 450 to 500 murders a year. Right now, we're standing at a little over 100 murders a year. Mm-hmm. So it has really changed a lot. And just one other personal anecdote, one of the biggest changes, and it's happening right now, is the drop in carjackings. I unfortunately was the victim of an attempted carjacking right outside my house in daylight at like 4:30 in the afternoon. A couple of young guys, fortunately for me, they weren't armed. One of them pulled me out of my car. I don't know what happened, but I guess the adrenaline kicked in because I was just tired of hearing about all this crime. So I pulled him out of the car. Then a second guy got into my car. He started to do something in the car. I pulled him out of the car, and then I started scrapping with these guys on the street. Well, then a third person pulled up in a truck, which it turned out later was stolen, surprise. And finally, just as situational awareness, I thought to myself, I haven't yelled at anybody. So I just started yelling so that I would get my neighbors to come out, because I live on a street with row houses. And that did the trick. People started running out of their house and yelling at these guys, and they all jumped in the truck and they took off. I later joked, by the way, that one of my neighbors had one of those cameras from their doorbell, and you could see me getting thrown to the ground. And I said, I really wish you would have had the video of me throwing these guys out of the car, but take what you can get.
Well, we now know that you are a badass, so that's clear to everyone listening. Just back to the National Guard, though, how do the troops feel that you've been able to talk to or hear about their feelings about being put in this position of doing what they're doing, but also doing things, as you said, like putting mulch down and like beautification efforts in DC?
Well, a lot of them are actually given cards that tell them what they can say or can't say, and a lot of them don't want to talk. But those that do, they've indicated, frankly, that a lot of them are kind of bored. These are young people that have been deployed from these 6 different states, as well as the DC National Guard. And, they want to be helpful, and they're certainly not going to undermine the overall mission that they've been given. But when people ask them about what they're actually doing, they feel like they're not really being fully utilized. There's been a few incidents where they've helped out with local authorities when things got a little out of hand. But again, they can't do any arrests. So a lot of the times they're just walking along the mall, staring at their phones. They want to be doing something, but even some of the people that are higher up in the National Guard that don't want to speak publicly and identify themselves, they've indicated they would just like to be more useful in any way they can.
Now, the president wants to extend beyond the 30 days. What might happen?
Well, Congress is coming back, so by September 10th, they're going to have to decide whether or not they're going to extend this 30-day crime emergency. And this is required under the Home Rule Act enacted in 1973, that Congress must extend this if it's to happen. Now, as you know, President Trump has indicated he may do an end around lawmakers, which they, of course, wouldn't like, at least Democrats wouldn't. He has indicated that he might declare a national emergency and say that he can get around it this way. We also have pending legislation when lawmakers return that would extend this. Some some proposals would extend it indefinitely. Others would extend it 180 days. There is widespread support among Republicans to do this, so it's very possible that it could be extended for quite some time. The only way it could really be blocked is if in the Senate, the Democrats, as Senate Minority Leader Schumer has threatened to do, pull off a full filibuster and they block it, and then we'll see what the president will do.
All right, well, stay with us because in a moment we're going to talk about some of the larger issues this is bringing up, including President Trump's authority and the old one, D.C. statehood. One thing Trump did with WTOP News is Mitchell Miller will be right back.
Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Why have we asked our contractor we found on Angie.com to be our kids' legal guardian? Because he took such good care when redoing our basement that we knew we could trust him to care for our kids, all 8 of them, should something happen to us.
Are you my dad now?
No, sorry, I do basements. Connecting homeowners with skilled pros for over 30 years. Angie, the one you trust to find the ones you trust. Find pros for all your home projects at Angie.com.
How do you make chicken nuggets like 7,000% better? Short answer, you let Taco Bell make them. Long answer, start with all white meat chicken nuggets, bread them in crunchy tortilla chips, and serve them with Hidden Valley Diablo Ranch. Yep, that's Hidden Valley Ranch mixed with Taco Bell Diablo sauce. It's exactly what it sounds like, and somehow even better. Simple math, spicy results. Crispy chicken nuggets from Taco Bell. A brand new classic. At participating U.S. Taco Bell locations for a limited time only, while supplies last.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
Welcome back to One Thing Trump Did exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson. We're talking about the deployment of the National Guard to Washington, D.C. and the threats from the Trump administration to deploy troops to other major cities as well. I'm joined by WTOP News Capitol Hill correspondent Mitchell Miller. Mitchell, D.C. is a special case among cities because it is a federal district. What kind of authority does the president have beyond what you have just been talking about before the break?
Well, the president certainly has the authority to activate the National Guard, and that's exactly what he has done. What's different about D.C. Than states is the mayor of D.C. cannot activate the National Guard. Of course, any governor of a state can do so. So that puts D.C. in a very unique situation, and it puts the mayor, Muriel Bowser, in an odd situation in which she generally, while supporting the help that the law enforcement is getting locally, does not really appreciate the National Guard 2,000 members being sent here, and yet she cannot do anything. We have a D.C. delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's a longtime lawmaker who for years has tried to get the mayor to be able to make that call to activate the National Guard. And then most infamously, of course, the mayor could not make that call on January 6th when people were mobbing the Capitol here. And I was in the Capitol that day, and for several hours, we were wondering what was going to happen. And as you know, the National Guard was not activated. And that was ultimately the president's call until much later in the day. And by that time, much of the Capitol had been ransacked. So it's a very unique situation.
has the mayor been speaking out a lot about this, or has she been pretty quiet, just not to anger the president?
She recently held a news conference where she was kind of treading political water. She knows that the president can go after her in a heartbeat. The fact that he's talked about providing $2 billion to not only fight crime, but also to beautify D.C., she has welcomed that, even though the details are pretty scant at this point. But at the same time, the things that she has spoken out against the most forcefully has been in connection with ICE agents and these agents with face masks and people popping out of nowhere and pulling delivery drivers off of their moped, for example, sometimes not identifying themselves. The charges are not really clear to the people. And of course, there's concern from the mayor as well as the police chief about how that could affect the relationship between local law enforcement and people that they rely on to help get community involvement in fighting crime.
Now, for our listeners who haven't lived in Washington, D.C. or don't know that much about it, there are, 700,000 just about residents of D.C. who have no representation in Congress that can vote. You mentioned Eleanor Holmes Norton. She is a non-voting representative in Congress. They have no members of the Senate. There's been long a call for statehood in D.C. or some solution where maybe they become part of Virginia or Maryland or both. So that they have representation as other citizens of the United States do. Is this whole situation renewing calls for D.C. to become a state?
It is among Democrats, of course, but really they are going out and not really being answered because the Republicans, let's face it, they control the House and the Senate, the White House. They have supporters at the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's a really long slog for Democrats to try to get to become a 51st state. And even though there's been this call, as you know, for many, many years to provide D.C. residents a vote in Congress, I just don't see it happening anytime soon. Even when President Obama had control of Congress, if any time it was going to happen, that was going to be it. But they couldn't push it across the finish line. So I think this is going to be a rallying call for a lot of Democrats in D.C., but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Do we have any sort of data yet on what kind of an impact the deployment has had on crime in D.C. so far?
Yes, it's definitely going down. However, it had been trending downward since the start of the year. There was that infamous release from the Justice Department that it had gone down close to 25 or 30% for the compared to the prior year. So it was already going down. And now, of course, when you have all these National Guard troops out, you have federal agents out making arrests. There's been more than 1,300 arrests, well over 100 guns seized. There's no question that it has brought crime down. The question is, was it necessary to take this step? I actually looked back at some of the figures that you can do on a tool that DC provides. And it's interesting, in 2020, when President Trump was in his first term, during this period from January to August 11th, which is when he declared this crime emergency, in that year there were 115 homicides. This year, when the emergency was declared, there were close to 100, or there was about 99. So you could argue that at that time it was deadlier in D.C., but yet the president's rhetoric, of course, has been that this has just been the worst it's ever been, and that they're definitely cleaning things up. Now, there are some pieces of truth to that, as the White House points out every day with the arrests being made, that the crime is going down. The question is, how long will this last? And as you were pointing out with these other cities, is this really a tenable way to take on crime when you're going from city to city, whether it's Chicago or Baltimore, which the president has called a hellhole?
Right. So what would be your advice or thoughts for people in these other cities like Chicago and Baltimore, where this may be coming to very soon?
Well, I think that they need to lean on their local leaders and make sure that they're doing everything they can to fight crime and to make sure that those numbers are going down, and to illustrate the fact, if it is in fact going down, to make that clear. Obviously, we have people like Governor Pritzker and others, Wes Moore in Maryland, who are pushing back very, very hard. obviously. Also, though, for Democrats, this is a tough issue because Republicans, who doesn't want to bring down crime? Now, what's interesting also is the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, was recently asked in an interview on CNN whether or not he would want the National Guard sent to Shreveport, Louisiana, which actually has a higher per capita violent crime rate, or it did over the past year, than D.C. He was asked, would he call in the National Guard there? He said, well, that's not my call, and he kind of sidestepped the question. But there are certainly cities across the country that have major crime problems. The question is, can you always galvanize a federal force to come in and do something about it?
Yeah, we just recently did an entire show, a call-in version of our show about crime, and learned that the two cities with the highest crime rates in the country, or murder rates maybe, are Memphis and St. Louis, both in what we would call red states right now. Mitchell Miller, Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP News in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, too.
And thanks to you for listening to One Thing Trump Did. It was produced by Harrison Patino. Our next middle episode will be in your podcast feed later this week. We're going to be talking about the challenges of Generation Z. And if you like this podcast, please rate it wherever you get your podcasts and write a review. Our theme music was composed by Noah Haidu. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I'll talk to you soon.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather. In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to everybody.
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'm going back to my hometown to uncover the truth. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.